And we do want to get to the big news, of course, which is where negotiations stand with this deal. So give us your sense. Do you think it's realistic that you'll get a deal by the end of the week?
I do think it's realistic. Speaker Pelosi is working incredibly hard in conversation with the White House and Secretary Mnuchin to try to find common ground. We have done it on 4 separate occasions during the context of the coronavirus pandemic. We can reach another agreement this time around because the circumstance demands it. However, the agreement must be transformational. It must make a difference as it relates to the health, safety, and well-being of the American people, because the coronavirus pandemic has wreaked a lot of extraordinary pain in terms of public health and in terms of the economy. And we have a blueprint for that type of meaningful intervention. It's called the HEROES Act, and we passed it 2.5 months ago.
Of course, Congressman, one of the biggest sticking points is around the unemployment benefits, those checks that millions of Americans were getting every week for $600. Democrats continue to insist they want that full $600. Republicans, Steve Mnuchin, Meadows, initially saying, look, that's giving some Americans more than they were actually getting paid every week. Let's lower it to $200. My sense is they've come up a bit, but not to the full $600. So can you guarantee Americans that they're going to get that full $600 a week unemployment benefit? Where does that specifically stand?
I think it's possible for any one member of Congress, there are 435 of us, in addition to 100 senators, to guarantee any particular provision. I do know that Speaker Pelosi and the House Democratic Caucus are fighting hard to maintain that additional $600 per week emergency unemployment insurance enhancement because of the situation that everyday Americans confront. You know, we have lost over 50 million jobs. There are no jobs to return home to. America, or return back to work to. And America is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We should be able to provide some measure of modest assistance to people in the midst of a deadly pandemic where the economy is in recession, possibly heading toward depression-like conditions.
But Congressman, does the White House have a point here when they say, look, you're asking for a bill that's over $3 trillion in total, and that's a lot of money. They're looking for something more in the ballpark of $1 trillion. So it doesn't make sense to pay people more than they would be getting paid per week. What is your sense of that argument that the White House is making?
Well, that argument actually, thank you for asking that question. That argument has no basis in reality. In fact, there's no empirical evidence that the $600 emergency unemployment insurance enhancement is incentivizing people to stay at home. In many ways, that argument is insulting to everyday Americans who want to work, who view employment with the dignity that it traditionally has here in America. But they just want to be able to provide a comfortable living for themselves.
Where are you looking to compromise? Yeah.
Excuse me?
Congressman, where are Democrats willing to compromise? What is an area where you can say, look, we are willing to scale back? We know that Republicans are asking us to scale back that overall price tag. So give us an area where you would be willing to compromise, because ultimately Americans are saying, get a deal done.
Well, the American people are saying, get a deal done that makes a meaningful difference. Over, 150,000 people have died. More than 4 million people have been infected by the coronavirus. Over 5 million people have lost their employer-based health insurance. Over 100,000 small businesses have permanently closed. And of course, more than 50 million people have lost their employment. And so I think we have to have a comprehensive and transformative response because of the circumstances on the ground that the American people are confronting. That's not to say that we can't reach some accommodation, recognizing that you have Republicans in control of the Senate who want to do nothing, and at least the administration showing a willingness now to do something. But we'll have to see what the entirety of the proposal is. Part of the challenge that we confront is that the Senate Republicans haven't even put forth a bill that the Senate Republican Conference supports in its entirety. half their conference criticized the bill that Mitch McConnell announced last week. And so that is the challenge that we confront at this particular moment.
Congressman, we're running out of time. I do have two more very quick questions. We know that the Postmaster General coming to Capitol Hill later on today amidst these concerns really on both sides of the aisle about whether or not the U.S. Postal Service will be able to deal with the large volume of vote by mail that we are anticipating in the fall. What is your message going to be? What do you hope the takeaway is from today?
Well, it certainly is good news that he will be participating in that meeting. It's a sign of progress and evidence that there is a growing recognition by Republicans that in the middle of a deadly pandemic, no single American should have to choose between their health, safety, and well-being on the one hand and exercising their constitutional right to vote on the other. And so we have to provide options, which include universal access to being able to vote by mail, but also early voting in every single state and jurisdiction, and a robust amount of poll sites on Election Day for those who choose to show up on November 3rd. In the CARES Act, we have $400 million that was set aside in election security grants. We are fighting for another $3.6 billion for the democracy to be brought to life in a meaningful way in a pandemic and do it safely.
Congressman, very quickly, as we wait for former Vice President Joe Biden to announce his running mate, we know among the top contenders, Susan Rice, Kamala Harris, Karen Bass. Who would you like to see on that ticket?
Well, that's Joe Biden's choice to make. But of course, there is an extraordinary group of women who Joe Biden can choose from, who will be effective partners with him. All things being equal, Karen Bass or Val Demings would be great choices.
All right. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of your great insights. We really appreciate it on a very busy day on Capitol Hill.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.